Week 15 of the NFL season is officially here, so in today's video, let's go ahead and try and predict every single game of week number 15. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers, so make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, but let's hop into it. And we are going to begin with the Los Angeles Rams versus the San Francisco 49ers. Now, this is a really interesting game because both of these teams are coming off pretty awesome wins last week. For San Francisco, you had arguably your best win of maybe the last couple weeks, maybe not the season, but definitely for these last couple weeks. They just straight up dominated the Chicago Bears the entire night, both offensively and defensively, so that team does have a little bit of momentum heading into this game, whereas the same could also be said about the LA Rams. The LA Rams are coming off a very impressive victory over the Buffalo Bills, a game in which the Buffalo Bills had to score over 40 points to even try to get close to winning the game. So this game is really interesting because, again, like I mentioned, both these two teams are extremely hot, are playing some amazing football. Both these offenses should look really good in this game. It's just going to come down to which defense can create more stops. Both these teams have had some really good moments and some really bad moments on the offensive end. Same thing can be said about the defense. Both defenses have played at a high level at certain points, but also have played at a low level at certain points. For both these teams, this is a massive game because if San Francisco wants to find a way to win the division, they kind of have to win this one. And the same thing could also be kind of said about the LA Rams. So this game has massive implications for the rest of their division season. Ultimately, I am going to go ahead and pick the LA Rams. They've just played a better brand of football over the last couple weeks, whereas San Francisco was playing terrible football and up until last week. So I am going to pick the LA Rams to win 30-27. Moving on to our Sunday noon games, beginning with the Washington Commanders versus the New Orleans Saints. Again, a pretty interesting game here. I will say the New Orleans Saints are without their starting quarterback. I'm not sure if it's going to be Spencer Rattler or if it's going to be somebody else. Ultimately, though, I think this one is pretty obvious. I think the Washington Commanders are just way more talented. They have a much better offense. Washington was struggling prior to last week, but then last week they looked really good. So hopefully they can carry some of that momentum into this week. Jaden Daniels is playing at a high level, probably the rookie of the year. Let's see if he could keep it up against a Saints team that is somewhat respectable. I am going to go ahead and pick the Commanders to beat the injured and banged up New Orleans Saints 28-13. Moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Cleveland Browns. I will say Cleveland has been a lot more competitive over the last couple weeks. They actually beat the Steelers a few weeks ago, had a somewhat competitive game with them recently, whereas Kansas City has really struggled to put away not good teams and even some good teams. I do think Kansas City will find a way to win this one, even if it's ugly or if it's really pretty. I think eventually they will find a way to win, but I will say I do think Cleveland will keep this game interesting and potentially could find themselves in a situation where they're leading the game late. Ultimately, though, I think the trend will continue where the Kansas City Chiefs don't play their best brand of football, but find a way to win. Eventually, Patrick Mahomes will put together a game-winning drive, or the defense will put together a nice set of stops to eventually allow their offense to win the game for them. So I am going to ultimately pick the Chiefs to win an ugly, but kind of an on-par game for them, at least for this season, with a final score of 24-20. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals versus the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Titans are coming off one of the worst losses in the NFL this year. They lost to the Mac Jones-led Jacksonville Jaguars. Really ugly game on both sides of the football for them last week. I will say I thought the defense played okay. Will Levis continues to have some flashes, but last week I thought he looked really poor against a really bad Jacksonville defense. This week he is going up against a not so good defense in Cincinnati, though I think Cincinnati's defense has played a tad bit better as of late. Still not very good at all, but Will Levis is just not a very good quarterback, and that Titans offense has been just disgusting all year long, whereas Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and the Bengals offense has kind of found a nice rhythm and has looked really good this year, especially now that they have some sort of run game with Chase Brown. Ultimately, I do think the Bengals will win. I know their records are somewhat close, but when it comes down to talent and just play on the field, the Bengals clearly are better than Tennessee. I have the final score, Cincinnati 26, Tennessee 14. Moving on to the Miami Dolphins versus the Houston Texans. The Dolphins really struggled early in the year, but have started to pick up the pieces and are starting to play some of their best football of the season, at least up to this point. Whereas Houston has been up and down. They have some good wins, but they also have a couple just really bad losses. It's kind of not too easy to predict Texans games because you just don't know what version of the team you're going to get. Are you going to get the team that we thought this team could have been heading into this year, or are you going to get this really not so good version of football that we have seen from this Texans team? It's been inconsistent on both the offense and on the defense, so it's really hard to predict this one, whereas the Miami Dolphins has been a lot more consistent these past couple weeks. For Miami, this is kind of a must-win game. Almost every single game moving forward for Miami is somewhat like a playoff game, so this one is a massive game for them if they do want to make the playoffs. Whereas for Houston, they already are probably going to win the division, but it would be nice to find a way to beat a really good team. Unfortunately, I just don't know what to expect from Houston, whereas I kind of know what to expect from this Miami Dolphins team, so I am going to pick the Dolphins to win this one late in the fourth quarter with a final score of 37-32. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens versus the New York Giants. I would be willing to put every dollar in my bank account on the Baltimore Ravens to absolutely destroy the New York Giants. If this game is somehow close in the fourth quarter, and by close, I mean like within 10 points, I will be stunned and I will be extremely disappointed in Baltimore. Sure, Drew Lock has had some good moments, has made some good plays, but Baltimore is way too good to even be in some sort of ugly slugfest with this Giants team. With that all said, Baltimore has got to find a way to get that ground game going with Derrick Henry, which they will. This Giants defense is okay, but it's not good. I do think Baltimore will blow this Giants team out. I have the final score 33-7. Moving on to the New York Jets versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars somehow won last week, which is horrible news if you are interested in getting Travis Hunter, which the Jaguars should be number one team that should want Travis Hunter. They could use a receiver and a cornerback, but they won last week, and that's got to be a terrible feeling for all Jaguars fans. As for the New York Jets, the offense has somewhat come to life these past few weeks, especially last week where Aaron Rodgers had probably his best game of the season. Still think both these teams are bad, but the Jets are just way more talented, have much better quarterback play, and the defenses just aren't even close. I'm going to pick the Jets to win in fairly easy fashion. I have the final score 21-10. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt. I'll be really quick. I did start a brand new YouTube channel called Metro Stories. I think you guys might like it. It's a channel that we simply focus on stories of NFL players as well as NFL teams. So if you guys are interested in that, go ahead and look in the description below as well as on the pinned comment where you're going to find a link for that channel. But let's get back to the video. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers versus the Dallas Cowboys. This is a tough one to pick because both these teams have had some good glimpses over the last couple weeks. Obviously for Dallas, it was a really rough start to the season. Absolutely no ground game. The defense was filled with injuries, but over the last couple weeks, the team has gotten a bit more healthy on the defense with guys like Deron Bland, Trevon Diggs, and Micah Parsons coming back. Still no DeMarcus Lawrence. I don't know when he's coming back. And unfortunately, DeMarvin Overshown, their stud linebacker, is out for the season. Hopefully he can get better. For Carolina, the offense has played a whole lot better these past few weeks. Bryce Young has looked great. Adam Thielen has been awesome. The offensive line has been nice. Chuba Hubbard's been good. The defense for Carolina does scare me. I don't really know if the Cowboys have the offensive personnel to really beat up on this bad Panthers defense. Sure, CeeDee Lamb could get going and have over 100 yards in the day, but if you can't get other guys going like Brandon Cooks and Jake Ferguson in the ground game, Carolina has a good chance to win this one. With that said, Carolina is actually a decent team right now. They've had a couple good wins against the Giants and the Saints. They've had a couple close losses, which are really good for this Panthers team. And I kind of think we're going to see a good version of Carolina versus this Cowboys team. Do I think Carolina just goes in there and stomps out the Dallas Cowboys? No, it's going to be a really close and competitive game. I think Carolina will find a way to win this one. They have, in my opinion, a little bit more momentum heading into this game. Sure, Micah and the defense could stomp out on Bryce Young. That could definitely happen, but I don't think it will. I'm going to go ahead and pick the Panthers to win 22-18. Then we begin our afternoon window, and I think after the initial 12 o'clock games, this is really where the good games start. Everything before this, besides like the Miami game, everything else before this is kind of, I don't want to say boring, but just not that interesting. We're going to begin with the Buccaneers versus the Chargers. Now, the Chargers have been playing some really good football. They are a bit banged up on the offense with no J.K. Dobbins, which is a massive loss for this team. The offense just doesn't look the same without him on the field. It's just not as productive. And Justin Herbert is an awesome quarterback, but he just doesn't have the weapons outside of a couple guys here and there to really put pressure on a Buccaneers defense that I think is playing good enough. Tampa Bay will put up points. I know the LA Chargers have a good defense, but the Buccaneers will find a way to score points. Baker Mayfield is playing at a very high level. They have too many talented players on the outside. They have a nice ground game going. Will score points. So eventually it's just got to come down to, can this Chargers offense make enough plays to really keep up with this Buccaneers team? I just don't think that they have the personnel right now to do so. If they can get the ground game going, I think that makes this game a lot more interesting. Without no J.K. Dobbins, I don't see how they're going to work the clock, dominate time of possession. They don't have the receivers to really dominate the time of possession, so I am going to pick the Buccaneers to upset, I suppose, the LA Chargers. I had the final score, Tampa Bay 28-24 for the LA Chargers. Then moving on to the Colts versus the Broncos. Now, I looked into the Broncos season to see if they had played any rushing quarterbacks, and they really haven't played any rushing quarterbacks outside of Lamar Jackson. But in that game versus Baltimore, Lamar didn't run the ball that much at all. I will say Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens absolutely dominated the Denver Broncos, but I don't think there's a lot you can take away from that game that will apply to this game. Anthony, since coming back to the starting lineup, has been okay, has had some good moments, but still is extremely inconsistent. So that's kind of what makes this one hard to predict, because if they have a good Anthony Richardson game, both passing the ball and running the football, then he can definitely make this game a lot more interesting. But that Denver Broncos defense is really good, and I think it's going to give Anthony a ton of fits on the offensive side of things. Whereas on the other side, Bo Nix and the Broncos offense has really got its groove going. Bo Nix is playing at such a high level, arguably the offensive rookie of the year. This game is really interesting and also really important for both these teams. For the Colts, if you want to somehow win the division, you have to win this game. If you want to somehow make the playoffs, you have to win this game. Whereas for Denver, if you want to continue to improve your chances of making the playoffs, winning against a Colts team that isn't great kind of has to be a priority for them. So that does make this one pretty interesting, but I am going to pick the Denver Broncos to squeeze out a victory here, 28-21. Then moving on to the New England Patriots versus the Arizona Cardinals. This game should be pretty fun regardless of if these two teams are championship contenders or not. For Arizona, I want to see how they bounce back after a pretty unfortunate loss to the Seattle Seahawks. That was a massive game, and they lost it. So now you have a bit of a bounce back game versus a not so good Patriots team. However, for the Patriots, you really have nothing to lose if you can go out there and have a close competitive matchup. I want to see Drake May look good against a not so good Cardinals defense, though they do play very hard. This game shouldn't have too much implications for the rest of how the season will go, but this game could have potential big time effects on how the draft could go. If the Patriots are to win this game and move up to 4 wins on the season, they're going to move from a potential top 5 pick to potentially being even outside the top 10. So for the Patriots, you probably don't want to win this one, whereas for Arizona, you probably do want to win this one to increase your chances of making the playoffs. Ultimately, I think Kyler Murray will make enough plays. That Patriots defense is okay, but not great. I have the Cardinals winning 23-18, and hopefully that offense for Arizona can finally get Marvin Harrison Jr. fully unlocked. And then we get to the game of the week, in my opinion, and then we have arguably the game of the week, though these next 3 games could all be considered that. We have the Buffalo Bills versus the Detroit Lions. This game is awesome. It has so many different storylines going into it. You have a potential Super Bowl matchup played out at 3 o'clock on Sunday. This game is going to be very interesting. I do think the Lions are going to be the favorite, and I think they should be the favorite. At the end of the day, we just saw that Bills defense give up over 40 points to the LA Rams. And I hate to break the news to you, but the LA Rams offense is not as good as the Detroit Lions offense. Now, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you guys the Lions are going to score 40 plus points, but if you gave up 40 to LA, I could see the Detroit Lions potentially doing some pretty good numbers as well. To me, it's really going to come down to, can the Bills defense generate stops versus the Lions? And if they can generate a few stops and maybe force some field goals, I think that offense for Buffalo should find a way to have a ton of success. Now, this game is going to be played at Detroit, which is a huge disadvantage for Buffalo because obviously if the Detroit Lions were playing in Buffalo, it's freezing cold over there right now and it's your home crowd. But because they're playing at Detroit, I do think that does make this game that much more difficult for Buffalo. But I don't know why. I just kind of have this hunch, this gut feeling that Josh Allen is going to outplay Jared Goff. If the Buffalo Bills can force like 2 turnovers, I think they'll win the game. And I'm just going to predict that they're going to find a way to force a fumble and force a pick. So if they do so, I got the Buffalo Bills winning. This one is pretty split for me. I could easily see Detroit winning because Detroit is, in my opinion, the best team in the NFL. But I just have Buffalo winning. I don't know why. It's a gut feeling. Sorry for the terrible analysis. I have the Buffalo Bills winning 30-26. And then we have arguably another game of the week with the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Philadelphia Eagles. This game is also extremely awesome. Pittsburgh, you're going to be playing at Philadelphia, which, similar to Buffalo, is a pretty big disadvantage towards the Pittsburgh Steelers. Regardless, though, both these two teams are playing some really good football. though the Eagles do have some issues. While the Eagles can run the ball all day long with Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts, they are really struggling to move the ball down the field through the passing game. And unfortunately, I do think in this game, they're going to have to do so, because if I am Pittsburgh, I am putting all my guys in the box and forcing Jalen Hurts to beat our secondary consistently, not force any turnovers. If Jalen Hurts can do that, I think they'll win the game. But because I haven't seen it the past few weeks, because I've seen Jalen Hurts struggling to move the ball down the field, passing the ball, not reading the defense at a high level, not necessarily turning the ball over, but playing extremely conservative, that does make me a little bit cautious about picking the Philadelphia Eagles to win this game. Whereas on the other side, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a really good offense. I know that's crazy to say because they've been so bad for many years, but they have a good offense this year. The only thing is, Philadelphia's got a really good defense, and they're playing at home, so they're going to be jacked up. This game is tough to predict. I do think it's a 50-50 split. I just feel like the Steelers offense will outplay the Philadelphia Eagles offense. I think the Eagles will run the ball effectively, but how much can they seriously depend on only the ground game, and how much can they actually move the ball with their passing game? If they can generate a couple of deep shots to make the defense play honest and play high safeties, then maybe this game could get a bit more interesting, but I am going to pick the Steelers to win this game. I think they'll do a good enough job against the run while also slowing down Jalen Hurts in the passing game, so I do have the Steelers winning 27-21. And then we have our Sunday night football game between the Green Bay Packers and the Seattle Seahawks, another game that is a really awesome game. For Green Bay, they haven't really beaten any great team this year. Sure, they have a couple good wins, and I'm not going to dismiss everything that they have done because they've played a lot of really good teams close, but I don't know. They haven't played as good as what I would like to see them do. Whereas for Seattle, early on it was rough, but these past few weeks have been really good. They're in first place in their division. They have everything in their destiny is within their control, but unfortunately, Green Bay is a really good team. I will say, similar to the Steelers in Buffalo, the Green Bay Packers have to go to Seattle, which is a really tough place to play, and Seattle's probably going to be very jacked up about this game as well. Geno Smith has been playing some good football, but that Green Bay Packers team, they got to put out a statement at some point, and I think this week could be that week. It's Sunday night, it's on primetime, you're the only game on, you haven't really beaten any great team this year. Now you have a chance to go out there and beat a really good team at their stadium, the division leader, find a way to win this one. I think you'll be right back in Super Bowl conversations. Jordan Love needs an MVP-like moment. He hasn't really had those moments this year. I think this week versus a Seattle team that is really, really good, I think he could potentially have it. I will say, if turnovers are an issue for this Packers offense, I do think that does sway my opinion so much more towards the Seattle Seahawks. If the Seahawks defense can force some turnovers, force some field goals, I think they'll win the game. But you can kind of say that about every single game on the schedule. I do think Green Bay will take good enough care of the football, and they will find a way to win this one 28-22. And then moving on, we have two Monday night games. I think both these games are fairly obvious, so I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but we do have one game at 7 and one game at 7:30. We're going to begin with the Chicago Bears versus the Minnesota Vikings. Unfortunately, Chicago just is not playing good football right now, though Odunze and Caleb Williams have had some nice moments the past few weeks. The defense looked like a shell of itself last week versus the 49ers, and unfortunately, you're going up against Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson, and Jordan Addison, who are coming off their best game of the season. You got one team that's heading in the right direction and another team that's heading in the wrong direction. I think this one's fairly obvious. I think Sam Darnold will play good football. I think he's not going to be seeing ghost, and I think they'll find a way to continue their hot streak. I have the Minnesota Vikings winning 31-17. And then lastly, we have the Atlanta Falcons versus the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't know who will be the starting quarterback for the Raiders, but I don't think it will be Aiden O'Connell. Sure, the Falcons have really been struggling, but if the Falcons lose to the Raiders, I'll be stunned. I just made a video on all the issues the Atlanta Falcons have, so if you want to check that out, go ahead and check it out after this video. It's on my channel. Again, that video goes into a lot of detail about the struggles for the Atlanta Falcons, but unfortunately for the Raiders, they just don't have the personnel to really take advantage of basically any of the struggles that the Falcons have. The Falcons don't have a great pass rush, though it's been better the past few weeks, but the Raiders aren't really a great pass blocking team. Raiders can't run the football, they don't have a great defense, they suck, whereas the Falcons have good pieces and just aren't playing good right now. I don't think this game will be a blowout, but I think it should be a dominant win for the Falcons. I think this game, hopefully, for the Falcons' sake, will be over by halftime. I don't think it will be close. I have the Atlanta Falcons winning 21-9. Now, real quick, here is a quick little summary of everything that I talked about in this video. Also, check out that record. I have a record of 137-71. Not too shabby, in my opinion. But if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. Again, 10,000 subscribers is on the horizon, so make sure you hit the subscribe button. And I love you guys. Peace.